Welcome, everyone. This is the general meeting of the Tampa Heights Civic Association for April 22, 2026. Welcome to everyone. We have folks in the room. We also have folks online. So online attendees, welcome to you as well. My name is Rick Fernandez. I have the privilege of presiding over the association as chair of the board and president of the association this year. And we have some board members here with us tonight. I'd like to introduce them when they're around so you guys know who to go to when you have complaints. Nicole Pederica is here to my right. She's our second vice president. Terrence Sabia is our recording secretary. Ced Carrington up here in the front. He's Northeast Quad rep. Lena Young-Green in the far back aisle. She is the at-large quad rep. And do I have another board member in here that I'm missing? I don't think so. Okay, that's it. All right, very good. Thank you all for being here. A moment for protocol. First of all, if you didn't notice, I hope you did, coming in the room, this is a weapons-free zone. I want to make sure everybody understands that. So if anybody's strapped, please leave and put your toy back in your car or wherever it is you want to secure it. Also, on something a little less dramatic, microphone discipline. We do have an audience here in the room. We have an audience online. We have two mics to accommodate that. This one up here takes care of the room. This little puck up here takes care of the Zoom folks. If you're up here at the podium giving a presentation, please be aware that you have the two audiences. If you're here and you're taking a question from the floor, understand that the people online are probably not going to be able to hear the question. So if you would, please repeat the question. A summary of the question would be sufficient so the folks online know what you're talking about when you proceed with your response. If you forget, I'll remind you. But anyway, thank you very much for that. Just pay attention to that. Okay, tonight's program, we have two tracks. The first one, the Tampa Downtown Partnership. Ashley Cannon in the back aisle is with us. She is the VP of Operations and Services for the partnership. She's here to talk about a special initiative that I'm going to read directly from our promo on tonight's meeting. Okay, this is an interactive segment. As part of their Neighborhood Intelligence Workshop series, their team will lead a brief 15-minute presentation focused on gathering community input around priorities, opportunities, and challenges in the Tampa Heights area. Following the presentation, they will remain on site with interactive boards to engage directly with attendees and collect feedback. Ashley will explain what all that means. The boards for the interactive feedback are back over here to the left. What's important for tonight, and please attend to this, Ashley will come up here first to talk about what that is, all right? When she's done, Ron Weaver, our prime speaker for the night, will be coming up here, and he'll have the balance of the meeting, right? What I want to avoid is anybody moving over there to deal with that while Ron is speaking. So if you would, please, whatever any interaction with the partnership is to be had, please wait till Ron is done, the meeting is done, and you can go over there and interact with Ashley at that time. All right, fair enough? Okay. With that said, and I will introduce Ron at the appropriate time when Ashley is done. For now, Ashley, come on up, do your thing.
Well, good evening. How's everyone doing?
Great.
I'm Ashley Cannon, as Rick expressed. Now, I actually go by AC, so please feel free to use that name. So I'm with the Tampa Downtown Partnership. I am the VP of Ops. And what we have here is our Neighborhood Intelligence Workshop, right? Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Tampa Downtown Partnership, I like to say that our job is to make you fall in love with downtown Tampa, right? We get to work with our stakeholders, our small business owners, our residents and communities that make up our downtown to ensure that the experience the vibrancy, the business, the economy of it, the safety, the cleanliness of it all is what it should be, so that everyone who visits downtown Tampa, whether you live, work, or play in downtown Tampa, you enjoy that experience, right? And so with our neighborhood intelligence workshops, what we wanted to do is create a way for you to give us informed and intentional feedback that would ultimately inform our work plans, right? So we are a contracted vendor essentially with the city of Tampa. And so we submit a work plan to them annually that shows them, hey, here's what we intend to achieve this year. Well, with that, we want to make sure that we achieve what our neighborhoods, the neighborhoods we represent that make up downtown, which there are 7 of, and Tampa Heights is one of them, that we listened, that we heard, hey, if the sidewalks aren't great here, we know about that, right? What's missing? There's a question at the top of the board. What do you believe should be created in your neighborhood that is currently missing? There's 4 quadrants there. Those 4 quadrants represent the areas that we as a partnership actually touch. So it's the business and the economy, it's safety and cleanliness. Um, I'm blanking and I can't see over there. I can't see that far. But we've got our 4 quadrants there. So what we're going to end up doing is, say you have a mobility and access. So say you have something, right, that an idea that it's create what's missing. And it's, hey, we need a monorail or we need a light rail to connect the city. We'd like the streetcar extended, right? That could go under create what's missing, right? Hey, we want that, and we'll put that into mobility and access. Or maybe it's a removing friction. Hey, I've called several times to get bushes cut back, and that's not happened. How do we remove the friction of getting you guys to be responsive when it's something in the right of way, right? So that can go on the board. No dream or no feedback, I'll say, is too small or too big. I think it's super important that even if it's the littlest of pet peeves or the littlest of desires, put it on there, right? Because we don't know if we don't ask. That's my mantra, you know? All right. So with that, I will give this back to you, Rick, and please feel free. I'll be here all evening long, so kind of chew on this and think about what your feedback could be specifically for your neighborhoods, and I'll be around all evening. So once you're ready, come and see me and I'll help you out. Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys.
Just as a footnote to that, the partnership, as I understand it, hosted a workshop for Tampa Heights, what, a week, 2 weeks ago over at the Rialto over on Franklin. And apparently it wasn't all that well attended, so they didn't get a lot of feedback from Tampa Heights. When I got wind of that, I asked them if they would be willing to come and do this here, where we would likely have a slightly larger crowd, which we do. And so hopefully we'll be able to elaborate a bit on the input that you received a couple of weeks ago. All right. All right. Now, Ron Weaver. I've been looking forward to this. Ron is our guest speaker on On my request, Ron sent a rather humble bio blurb describing himself as, quote, a retired real estate development lawyer and frequent lecturer for USF and Eckerd Lifelong Learning, where he speaks on topics related to Tampa Bay international history and current politics, quote unquote. That's a decent start, but I felt a little more background was warranted. Not a lot, I don't have a lot of time, but Ron is retired, only a minute or two, and he retired from his own firm, the Stearns Weaver firm, where he practiced law according to the LinkedIn profile over 46 years. I didn't do the math, but that's what the profile said. He's a 1974 graduate of the Harvard Law School. His practice focus has been land use, property rights, environment law, including sea level rise, transportation law, and policy. If you get around town to public meetings at all, campaign kickoffs, candidate forums, city council meetings, county commission meetings, fundraisers, galas, you mention it, you got it. You've noticed Ron is everywhere all the time. So much so that I've wondered at times whether or not there was a body double being used. It's really amazing. On several occasions over a period of 10 plus years, Ron and I have crossed paths at public hearings on transportation issues. We have almost always been on opposite sides. For my part, at least, that adversarial and very professional encounter has led me to develop a very deep respect for this man, which is why I'm so glad to be able to welcome him here tonight. Ron will be speaking to us on the topic of Tampa, transportation, and stadium funding, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I don't know where Ron will be taking us, but I suspect it will be an interesting ride. Ron Weaver. Sir. Check that, make sure it's comfortable for you.
And on each of those encounters, you were always right. But and sometimes we did find a little different way to what was best for this community. And I want to hear who you are and what you'd like to be sure we cover as between roads and rail and other transportation funding, all kinds, including aviation, the port, especially roads, and especially rail, please. And stadiums, whatever's on your mind, the new baseball stadium at Hillsborough College or not, public money or not, the CIT tax or not, were there promises made regarding the CIT tax that there would or wouldn't be baseball use of it for a new baseball facility? What was the legal opinion on the subject? We'll talk about what that opinion just came out last week from the county commission's outside lawyers on whether or not the CIT tax was intended to be used or not for baseball, a new baseball facility, and the legal opinion was that it could still be, by the broad language of, despite some discussion of whether or not it was intended to be used, the CIT tax, for a new baseball facility. But first, your name, please, and maybe just one thing either about you or that you want to make sure I cover. If you don't mind, anyone want to start? Mr. Citro, you want to tell us what you want to make sure I cover, Mr. Chairman?
Owns $1 billion for stadium. Why don't they buy some of that out? Present the raise ownership with $750 million and say, this is all we got. Take it or leave it, which lessens the burden on the tax.
Good question. Others, please. You want to identify yourself or not, and any issue you want to make sure I cover? Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Young. Ms. Young. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And beware the gentrification issues. So affordable transportation has to remain mixed, and to beware the gentrification issues we've just discussed before. Thank you, Ms. Young. Ms. Long. Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Yes, sir. Yes, Brian. How you been, Brian?
If the public funding CIP or other be used for stadiums, can it be tied to a requirement to also pay for public transportation bidding?
Ah, wonderful question. Wow, I thought a little bit about that myself the last few weeks as we watch whether they're going to compete in a way that requires. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Brian. You want me to repeat that question from Brian? Did you hear it? Whether or not we need to mix and make, when we do what we do with respect to the financing of the Rays new stadium, to mix funding of transportation at the same time as part and parcel of it. Great question. And I've been thinking a little bit about that. I haven't come up with an answer yet, but I'm going to try. And thank you so much for that fantastic question. Yes, sir. Yes, Adam and Taryn, good to see you and your wife here running for mayor. Thank you, Taryn, and thank you, Adam.
Questioning as CSX battle rails are very convenient used for a lot of connectivity inside of our city and our region.
CSX.
Where are we at with CSX?
Excellent. Thank you. Especially liability and insurance. And whether or not we have to pay $400 million for it and where we're going to get it and how it fits with everything else in tonight's presentation. Thank you, Adam. Others? Yes. And your name, please?
Steve,
Thank you, Steve Michael.
you mentioned earlier that do that, you make it more acceptable. Recently, I've seen there's been lane closures and a lot of bike lanes, and they become cluttered. I find them more difficult to travel. And in my neighborhood, it's caused a lot more congestion farther for the neighborhood, and they're going down Florida, and it's at rush hour, it's almost impossible. So we can, people we have, some of us do drive, public transportation is great, but it doesn't go everywhere all the time. It's hot and cold, it rains a lot. So for people my age, it's not always the best option. So
All right.
open and
Better teams, service, signage, the money to address the smoother dealing with those consequences of construction. Because I know exactly what you mean. It's maybe the last 6 or 7 months. For some reason, I've sensed that 10 or 12 times a month instead of once a month for the last 7 months. It feels like it's like 12 times a month. I get that genuine sensation you just mentioned, which is I'm going to be late to something. I've got to go 8 other blocks. I'm going to get a $100 ticket for going 36 miles an hour by a school that I don't usually go by in those 12 diversions a month that I'm living with. Not that I share your concern, but I do. Yes, there needs to be a better policy with what we call logistics and diversion, and the money for logistics and staffing and diversion. Yes, Taryn, Fabia.
Well, thank you, Aaron. And
Yes.
how can we finance it without using the CIP? Is there potential for private placement and IPO in the mix where the community itself brings fans could own the facility and receive a dividend from it, allowing the entire region to participate instead of just asking a single.
Instead of the CIT. But you're not going to replace the tourist development dollars or the community redevelopment agency tax increment financing?
For infrastructure, but not for the stadium.
Good answer. I'm glad you understand the difference. Very astutely, by the way. Much better answer than question from me back. Nicole, any? Be number 7. Thank you, Nicole. Uh-huh.
What the for that is specifically, but
Hmm. So West Tampa, West Tampa, West Tampa. Thank you.
Any others?
Yes. Thank you, Ari. You're number 8.
If the tax base of the property surrounding the stadium is lower potentially. And also, I'm kind of wondering the big picture, this is really good, but I mean, I hope it's not a stupid question, but I'm kind of wondering when these kind of things really benefit the sports franchise and not so much the public as the data seems to be, reporting. How is this not a budget?
The Mayor Pro lawsuit and the Miami Convention Center lawsuit, which challenged when the community investment tax was adopted in any others before? I'm going to start with that one because it's so tempting to start with the Mayor Pro lawsuit against the CIT. Any other before we move? Any other questions? Because thank you so much for letting us. I'll do these 8 in reverse order or thereabouts, if I may. And thank you for all 8 questions, because let's start with number 8. And thank you, Ari. When the 1996 community investment tax passed, 11% of which went to the stadium, is how it passed, because 2 or 3 roads and schools ones failed. We weren't ready to step up to the plate and pay for roads or schools. So we put roads and schools 25% each, and drainage and about 7 other things, including the arts, and 11% for Tampa Stadium, for the Raymond James Football Stadium, and it passed in 1996. Immediate past Mayor Bill Poe filed a big lawsuit, and it was heard just a mile from here in front of Judge Rex Barbas, one of our very finest judges. And Judge Rex Barbas had to entertain the claim that this violated the Constitution, which said tax money and the raising of revenue shall not be used for a private purpose. Therefore, he had to rule, as had the Florida Supreme Court in 1974, in the same question for the Miami Convention Center. Because the Miami Convention Center was part of a combination that looked like it benefited some of the private entities in the same complex, and therefore was seemingly public money for a private benefit. And the court said in 1974, in an opinion that was pretty out there, pretty, how shall I say, progressive, liberal, benefit of the doubt, that provision in the Constitution did not mean absolutely no dollar ever found its way into some private hand, but there was a predominance of benefit to the public instead of to some private interest. And some incidental benefits, like those who were in that convention center and those who got the benefit of advantageous leases or services or some private benefits, were incidental, quote the court. And same was true with respect to the general benefit of the stadium. Was not going to be just to the team owners, but the benefits were going to be in the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars of benefit to the entire community, not just to a particular bunch of owners, with the nature of the beast. Plus, the stadium was owned by the county instead of by the team. Therefore, there was a second firewall between the obvious answer that some of you may have had in your mind, which was, oh my goodness, Ron, that's clearly a direct benefit in direct violation of the Florida Constitution. That is a great, great question, a great way to start, because if I were to move back, Ryan, to your question one more time, could you ask it one more time, please? And stand up, please, so we can hear you. And I want to try to repeat it for the audience.
Or to move forward with funding, we as the public who want more spending on transportation, could we act our elected officials to make it a requirement that funding is paired with public transportation in the city?
Thank you. I've been to 4 or 5 of the last 8 meetings sitting in the audience. I do not represent them. I'm not paid by them. I do not represent them. I went as a citizen and I asked a similar question twice, I think, to similar effect, which was, what are you going to do about transportation? Are you going to partner with Armature Works, Midtown, the airport, International Plaza, International Mall, downtown Water Street, Brightline, in order to connect all of this into a viable way of making sure your 10 million visitors have adequate transportation? Now, at first, it was sort of like we already were getting to work with the airport. That was sort of the shorter answer. Eventually, the answer at a second or a third forum began to get a little more like, we're looking at ways that we indeed can integrate some kind of a rail into our proposition. There were no details, no promises. It was too early because they're still negotiating the basics of the deal, of course. So it would have been premature to have committed part of the money until they had found a way to negotiate who's paying what, to throw away some of the heart of the pro forma into a particular transportation destination until the right other players gave their share of it in relation to who benefited from it. So the bottom line is, I think it's a great idea. And I think, quite frankly, my hope was that somehow in doing the hard cutting of that last transportation answer for your question and mine would be that they would proposition the dollars of another financing tool, another creative vehicle to mobilize 3 or 4 other ways to fund the transportation that we failed in my main presentation, which is coming in just a few minutes, regarding the 4 or 5 times we've struck out. How could this be the one where they work together? And I even asked in one of the questions, I think Joe was there, free tickets from you, free tickets and free benefits from all those others, commitments to a certain amount of tickets they buy on the line. And so the line has the ridership and the financial wherewithal in order to do a perfect public-private partnership, to one of your other questions, in order to make sure that the raise or the catalyst to get us the final answer on the transportation funding that in my presentation in a minute, unfortunately, we struck out about 4 times out of the 5 times we've been at bat. Fortunately, we didn't strike out in the CIT, 25% for transportation in 1996, and we renewed it for an additional 15 years. So we get 45 years of credit for not striking out on transportation on that issue. And secondly, we get credit for having voted 57% of us in 2018 to have there be a penny sales tax for rail and roads and 4 or 5 other things to relieve congestion, intersections, safe bike paths, safety to schools. All of that was in there. 57% of it voted for it. And the Supreme Court threw it out on a technicality. What was the technicality that the Florida Supreme Court threw it out on in 2018 after 57% of us voted for it? Was we had failed to go first to the county commission per the statute and get the county commission to adopt a particular destination for each of the monies. Oh. It was in the ballot initiative where the money would go. Why was it in the ballot initiative that passed by 57% where the money would go? Because we struck out in 2010, because in 2010 we had this fantastic campaign and we were in this room and every other room pushing for this penny sales tax for transportation, including rail, but half the room wanted to go to USF first and half the room wanted it to go to the airport first. And the language was left vague so that both of them would think where they were first. I don't know how that works in dating with respect to women waiting to be first, but it probably doesn't work, and I haven't tried it yet. But I don't think you can make both sides think they're going to be first by saying neither. And therefore, they both feared they would be last. Therefore, it failed. And therefore, we put exactly where the money would go into the 2018, having failed in 2010 by not saying where the money would go if you voted for it. And the Supreme Court said that violated the technicality that only the county commission, not the referendum and signatures to go on the ballot language of where it's going to go, must be first approved by the county commission. By the way, the county commission saw the writing on the wall and did indeed adopt that exact same schedule. But in the Supreme Court, and I drove up for the argument, I didn't argue it. I wasn't one of the participant lawyers. I was just in the audience. And when that came up, I kind of leaped up in my seat, looked around the room, because the county commission indeed had blessed it after the fact, which means the neutral court would have gone with it and said, substance of the intent of the law fulfilled, right? Like the substance of the law on private versus public benefit a while ago. But what happened? There were amicus briefs filed by both houses of the legislature. And there were conservative folks all over the audience who were obviously, and two or three justices up on the court began to pause with me. Two or three of the justices paused, kind of like, well, heck, the county commission agreed to that same outcome. And then one of the more conservative justices simply said, too late. It was not approved before it was voted on. Therefore, the voters did not know whether or not this was the county commission's chosen destination or not. And the two or three justices that were leaning our way suddenly sat back in their chair, because it's kind of like, at the time of the vote, the county commission had not engaged on the required act of just setting the destination for each of those dollars. Now, what was the next question? Ask it again, please. All right, you want to do that one, Adam? We're going to do them. Adam, ask yours one more time. CSX, and I said, let's start with liability and insurance. CSX, where is it? Where ought it be? CSX.
Where does the CSX stand right now? And what are our options for it to become something that can be more of a convenience?
Thank you, Adam. Fantastic question. I remember one study a few years ago that said that the questions of liability and insurance and paying what unfortunately a public company has to explain to its shareholders anytime that it seems to be giving away the precious resources and assets of those shareholders who could charge more for them. We'll get to Joe's question in a minute about the Tampa Stadium ownership. The same is true with respect to the nature of the shareholder duties of the board of CSX with respect to how much they charge us for and who's liable and on the hook and who pays for the insurance regarding CSX. And I believe, quite frankly, that the demand for CSX in its current location has not generated a whole lot more than those three questions that we still have, which are liability, whose, insurance, who's paying for it, and how much is it really worth? And how much of a market for it is there, if you know what I mean? Does it seem like a sole user and you'd be able to deflate the price? Or does it seem like an awful lot of valuable land in an awful lot of about 50 miles of beautifully expensive locations that are twice as expensive as they were a mere 10 or 20 years ago? Which is it? For my shareholders to appraise the value of what I'm giving away, which I'm not going to be allowed to do as a corporation. They're not another government. They are not a cooperative government. They're not a government charged with affording public transportation. They are a private entity, and they have three huge concerns: must get fair value, must deal with the liability risk, which they're unwilling to assume under any circumstances, and who pays for the insurance with respect to the nature of that liability in the first place. And quite frankly, I haven't seen much progress. Maybe some of you have. Does anyone have a better update than those three remaining issues of what's the real current value, who's going to be liable, and who's going to pay for the insurance with respect to CSX? Anyone? Great question, Adam. I wish I had more. I know 3 years ago, I held my breath when that study came out because something in my gut said that if only the value could be as a sole user, that it doesn't really, with its ribbon, and rather than it being twice as valuable as 20 years ago, it's really an almost useless ribbon except for one purpose. Therefore, that's the appraisal. That's what you need to give the shareholders with respect to the amount we got for the property and its unique value as the ribbon that it is. not counting its extortion value for hiatuses between adjoining properties, not counting extortion value for hiatuses vis-a-vis adjoining property, like the folks did in DC when they abandoned some railroads. Okay, next question. Okay, who wants to re-ask their question? You want to re-ask your Tampa Stadium question, Joe? And stand up to be heard. One more time.
That TSA, Hillsborough County, owns a $2 billion asset, Raymond James Stadium.
Yes.
Why not bond that out to the tune of, let's say, $750 million and go to the race and say, this is all we have?
Is that compatible with the lease? Is that compatible with the existing Buccaneers lease?
I believe it is.
I'm not sure.
Well, you were talking about steady revenue.
Yes. Yes.
You tax, fee everything that goes along with tickets, merchandise, food, drink, and of course, the development that they're going to do, rents, hotel event fees, everything. That would be the city fee that's paid for that, in my opinion.
Good question. I'm glad you asked it. I've also, I don't know the answer to where, except it may or may not be compatible with the Buck lease. It may not even be compatible with the Taylor Swift's contracts. And guess how many of those there were? 3 sold out concerts. Guess what we derived as a community every time she sells out a concert, 3 in a row? $1.8 million each. Every single time she sells out that stadium, that night is $1.8 million. Question is whether or not the existing arrangements with respect to the Buccaneers, 2 monster trucks, and about 25 other concerts and about 50 other non-concert events every year, whether or not those leases and those advance a year or 2 out do or do not comport with what you mentioned regarding the bonding. Plus, the bonding requires an income stream. It's not like you can bond $750 million of the $3 billion or $2 billion that it's worth. You have to have an income stream. And you said, well, let it be the leases and the concessions and all that. Well, those are sometimes already spoken for in the nature of the structure, where they're not available for some new surprise bond issue that causes there to be a sufficient revenue stream. There may be some loose revenue streams, maybe a few incidental, or not spoken for, or the lease is up, and somehow or the other you could get the lease renewed based on what you just mentioned. But it's a great question, Joe. I wish I had an answer. Lauren, did you have a question to add to it? Live off till maybe, Lauren. Because the what they did? Oh, it's a done deal. I haven't heard yet that it's a done deal. And again, I don't represent them. In fact, I'm talking about stadiums generally, and I have a few more examples if we have any time left. I have a series of examples, in fact, including a $4 million bond issue in '67 to build the big sombrero, 46,000 seats, and a $13 million bond issue in 1974 to expand it to 71,000 seats with a $13 million bond issue. It cost in 1998 $168 million. The Lightning 1996 cost $139 million. Steinbrenner practice for the Yankees cost $30 million. A lot of this was paid for by combinations of CIT and community tax increment financing under a community reinvestment act. We have about 11 districts for tax increment financing where you freeze the current low level of your taxes that you pay, and the increase, which is sometimes 10 or 15, 25 times if you do a big development where there was little to nothing before, that increment, tax increment financing, is bonded, and that creates an additional 50 or 100 or $500 million worth of potential tax increment financing that is involved in the current proposed baseball deal. As to your question about how traffic will be managed, do you know Dawn Dodge by any chance, the local engineer? Her firm is called Kimley Horn. And you might just call her Dawn Dodge, Kimley Horn. She's come to each of these neighborhood meetings. You can just say, thank you, Ms. Dodge, for coming to the neighborhood meeting. What do you believe to be the consequence in the following direction with respect to the nature of the stadium area, with respect to the level of service on Dale Mabry and Tampa Bay Boulevard and Martin Luther King and Columbus Boy Scout What do you think the level of service will be each of the next 20 years if it opens in 2029 with the current background growth? And what will it be with your addition to the current projected background growth? And by what year will there be enough ridership for Ron's Rail? And by what year will there be enough for Ron and Brian's Rail? By what year will there be enough to pay for Brian and Ron's Rail? Because we all want to know that one, please. And thank you for helping Brian and me with that one. And your neighborhood, I'm dying to know what she says. She's been studying it like crazy. She is on the clock. She is being paid to study it on behalf of Kimberly Horn, as I understand, the beloved Dawn Dodge. Yes. Now, repeat your question again, please. Nicole, yours again was, stand up, please, so we can hear it, and it can be heard or repeated for at home. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for West Tampa, West Tampa, West Tampa. Oh, man. West Tampa, West Tampa, West Tampa. A lawyer like Rick and me, named Hugh McFarland, watched Boston and New Orleans dredge up what became the most successful Boston and New Orleans city developments. He came to Tampa and bought the Alligator Swamp, 113 acres, starting where Blake High School is, extending into West Tampa. And the beginning of West Tampa, it became the fourth largest city in Florida before merged in 1925. Our lawyer, Boston and New Orleans, Hugh McFarland, came down. What he learned in Boston and New Orleans, he did here, dredging up what was known as Alligator Swamp, which was West Tampa. And now West Tampa is being asked about from the other end. I believe that about half of the 120 cigar factories were in West Tampa. So as far as preserving the integrity of West Tampa, I would hope that whatever is done for West Tampa is going to preserve not only the free flow when we get that fantastic Brian Ron Rail from Lauren and Dawn, when we get the Brian Ron Rail from Lauren and Dawn, that we include 3 or 4 very convenient stops, not too soon, but not too late, because I sat with the mayor at Midtown's groundbreaking, because as Rick said, I've been to 1 or 2. And at the groundbreaking for Midtown, what the mayor simply said was, wouldn't it be great if we ran a rail down Cypress right here? Because you just ridden that 2.5 or 3 miles down Cypress, and it's really kind of sweet. Why don't we have rail down Cypress the way Michael, Victor, my driver, and I just came down Cypress? Why don't we have rail from downtown here to Cypress? And that's been like 6 years ago. And that's $1 billion development without any public subsidy. If you want to talk about mixed use and when we do and do not require public subsidy. So the bottom line is that West Tampa and all of its history and all of its culture and all its transportation benefits of the Brian, Lauren, Ron, Dawn Rail needs to make sure that it has all the right 7 or 9 West Tampa locations as stops, not too soon, but practical. Maybe they're 3/4 of a mile instead of every mile, but the right ones linearly every 3/4 of a mile instead of every mile for walkability, so that West Tampa can get within about 3/4 of a mile of whatever that rail looks like, to A, to relieve congestion, and B, to pay back for the dislocations that are going to occur with West Tampa. Because without that, and that soon, by whatever creative financing you guys come up with, we've got to save West Tampa. It's too precious to risk West Tampa becoming the victim of baseball instead of the beneficiary of baseball. And thank you for that. I'm dying to know where we're going to put those stations and where we're going to put maybe some special something in each of the stations, not only to salute West Tampa, but also to help with West Tampa's greatest needs, whatever they are and whatever they've been accumulating to be. Let's pay them back the way we did Water Street. The first thing we did in Water Street is we were flooding. We probably were down there before we did Water Street. If you were down there, it was flooding. The first thing they did was a $6 million, and you may have been on the council, Joe, a $6 million stormwater pond under Fleet Street. So suddenly all that flooding goes away just like that, just by declaring war on the problems of Water Street, because all of them had to be solved or we couldn't be able to succeed in Water Street. And you know how Water Street has succeeded. The same is true of West Tampa. I think the West Tampa answer, respectfully, ought to be, with that transportation bent that I just shared with you from this format, is that somehow or the other, West Tampa needs to be the same exact beneficiary. And I know exactly where you start $30 million of it. There is pending a combined federal state grant to deal with flooding, past and future, preventative to it happening again the way it happened with respect to those last two hurricanes. It's right in the pitch by baseball and the finance guys at the county. It's called the $30 million flood, past and future federal grants and state grants on the subject. So what we need to do is make sure that that $30 million is directed to just the right destination for just the greatest needs regarding West Tampa flooding and any other kind of infrastructure and benefit to West Tampa that could come from that 30 million right there in the pro forma from the county at the workshop last week. It popped right up, and it was an interesting little 30 million. My curiosity is, there are 2 or 3 other gyms waiting like that for West Tampa. And how do we find them? And how do we put them with Mama? Because if West Tampa is going to be our new mother, our new host, we need to make sure we take care of Mama. I learned that a long time ago. We need to take care of Mama. We need to take care of West Tampa. We need to find 2 or 3 very special things for West Tampa if this deal ever goes through. And transportation and that $30 million vis-a-vis stormwater, past, present, and future facilities is only 2 of the 5 or 6 things we ought to do for Mama West Tampa hosting baseball. Next question, please, to repeat your question. Yes, are you want to repeat your last one? Again, you want to repeat your question, standing up? Anyone else? Who did we not get to? Yes, yeah, I'm sorry. Repeat your question a little bit louder, and they can hear you at home. Yes. Yes. Yes.
We do not have the failures that we had in Tampa anymore because we are dispersed. We did a really good job of using the incentives.
Yes.
My question was, what do you think we could do to make sure that our community is diverse, including looking at affordable transport?
Thank you. If you're over 65, you ride free in Miami in one of their bond issues. Fund transportation in Miami. And in the ballot, it says, and if you're over 65, you will always ride free on anything bought with the outcome of this bond issue, of this referendum. It occurs all over the country. Now, here's how it would work in Tampa Heights. If there's a deal cut on affordable housing, the affordable housing study should include the nature of whether or not those folks who live in 3 or 4 neighborhoods like Tampa Heights, as far as the benefits of the next rail stop or 2 we just talked about, when you combine all of these rail stops, where will we create free rail stops? Because quite frankly, I think that's a great question. I think we need to create, while we're getting those free rail stops, and rail takes 4 or 8 years to do, depending on which creative mechanism you use to get the rail in 4 to 8 years, that until then, the HART budget will be subsidized by a public-private partnership consortium that has the beneficiary neighborhoods, the first few neighborhoods that support the West Tampa platform. With respect to what I've already said about West Tampa, there are a series of next layer neighborhoods on the way on the primary route with respect to rail. For example, there'll be 3 or 4 of you, including Tampa Heights, originating. And what you need to do is, until that time that rail brings the affordability of the free ride, like the Miami bond issue for over 65, and we'll start there. Quite frankly, I think you might want to find a way to have the public-private partnership also add those who are at a certain income level. So the certain income level will always ride free. And of course, the over 65 ride free, like in Miami. And the third ingredient, Nina, would need to be this. until such time as you can create that rail balance and that rail affordability for the neighborhoods that are going to be supporting baseball as the surrounding neighborhoods, the neighborhoods along the rail to support this solution, those neighborhoods would get a free bus until the free rail, meaning you would be looking at immediate relief with respect to affordable transportation in the 3 or 4 neighborhoods that are the immediate sisters of West Tampa in putting all this together between downtown and baseball West Tampa. Now, let's not worry about South Tampa, and let's not worry about North Tampa yet, if they're not on the first rail line from downtown to West Tampa. Neighborhoods like we're talking about here in Tampa Heights, as the sending neighborhood in effect. This is the sending neighborhood. If we run a 5-mile private partnership. 4 years ago, a private company proposed, and the name of the company was Plenary, Plenary. Look it up. They're a big international public-private partnership firm. And there are 3 Spanish firms that do it all over the world, including one that proposed an elevated 54 in Pasco as an elevated 54 5 years ago. Those public-private partnerships live off the amount of the fare at first. And what we need to do is to buy down the fare for those at a certain income level and buy down the fare, like in Miami, for those who are over 65, so that those 2 categories of people will ride free on the bus immediately, as long as it's a bus to the airport area and the baseball area, and to create a responsible community response to your and these other questions regarding what Dawn and Brian and Lauren come up with respect to the free bus and rail for the categories of people that deserve this community, seeing the public-private partnership help those who need it the most in those 3 or 4 neighborhoods that are supporting Mama as the West Tampa hostess for baseball. I think that's an extremely fair request, considering the nature of the support that these neighborhoods will provide for providing the necessary rail and to providing the necessary political support to get it passed. And the public-private partnership with respect to the usership of those same 3 or 4 neighborhoods that will be the most likely to provide the dollars between the low income and the 65. Those dollars are going to be a part of the pro forma in the public-private partnership as respect to what the rates are in order to make it work for the public-private partnership. Next question, please. Who was the next question? And how are we on time? 15 more, Ms. Fabian? Yes. Repeat your question, please.
What if
Tampa
and Hillsborough don't provide tax dollars to the stadium facility?
Yes.
But instead, 49% is actually owned by fans living in the region, as well as a small portion that could be publicly traded. The private placement and IPO that they could participate economically in the ownership of the stadium facility itself, instead of putting the burden on our taxpayers.
Wow. Great question. A little bit ambitious, and therefore, when it runs into realpolitik and the Tampa Strait of Hormuz, I'm just gauging the mind in those gunships, those little gunships that we didn't obliterate. Yeah, I'm thinking this. Green Bay, Wisconsin, all the fans own their 50,000th of it. They own the franchise. The reason that model may not work here, unfortunately, is that we're in the middle of the stream. We're not starting a stream where we could lay out a zero-based budget with a zero-based political realpolitik here in the Tampa Strait of Hormuz. Because what you've accumulated is an expectation that when this deal is cut, it will instantly add $500 million or $1 billion in value to whatever it is that they paid for the team. And I don't know what they paid. Did they pay $4 billion for it. That's what the average has been lately. You think it was four-ish? You think it was eight? Okay, they paid eight for it over time, maybe. Okay, if they paid eight for it over time, and I don't know for sure that's the number because that sounds high to me because I think the Yankees are only worth 7 billion, so it's probably closer to 3 or 4 billion. But whatever they paid for it, you're going to have to work into their investors and their return someplace for the creative imposition of this brilliant Green Bay model. And the Green Bay model worked from scratch because in effect you went down and you subscribed. How much they pay for it? That sounds like my number as well. For the raise, only 1.7. The Yankees are worth 7 billion. They paid only 1.7 billion. That's going to help you. So that sounds like something more like I've heard. So if 1.7 billion dollars is all they paid for it, and not 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, the Yankees are worth 7 billion. That means that somehow or the other, if you could find a place to get on par with one of the 2 or 3 categories of their investors and basically infuse the local folks who are willing to put up that money as if they were doing it from scratch for Green Bay, which is where the model works perfectly and where it has worked for Green Bay. The question is whether or not you will want to have what I call the New York Jets 25 grand. Guess what you paid for your seat forever at the New York Mets Stadium 7 years ago for the New York Jets, for the Jets Stadium in New York? 25 grand. What did you get for it? You got the ability to sell it to anyone. You got season tickets. You got all the concerts. Bottom line is that if you can create a model, a financial model that gets to one of these Green Bay models, and I told you some of the stretch with respect to Green Bay, but don't forget the New York Jets, because the New York Jets, remember that seat? Some of y'all heard about it in New York, didn't you? The $25,000 seats. A good seats in like the first 5 or 10 rows, but it's 25 grand. Why 25 grand? Because if you add up all of those seat purchasers, that's that chunk of the total financing package from those same investors for which they will get the 49 or the 25 or the 15% piece of the action. The way at Green Bay, it's 100% of the action for all those who bought their seat and pays the annual fee to renew their seat regarding the franchise is owned by the fans of Green Bay. You must do a model between Green Bay and the New York Jets to find a way to get those folks who want to own a piece of it to help pay for their slice of the deal. Now, but follow-up question, please.
If they pay in for just the facility side, not to the franchise, but to the stadium entity, just the entity of the stadium, not the franchise. So if you look at the Battery in Atlanta,
Yes.
it's been the model.
Yes.
So there are 3 components.
Yes.
The Battery, which is publicly traded.
Yes.
They have their mixed-use development, the franchise, and Truist.
Right.
So, and the stadium. So they break it down within those 3 within publicly traded. Can we look at publicly trading for private placement combination, just the stadium itself? Just the entity.
And that would yield a piece of the profit. And when it yields a corresponding piece of the profit, that piece of the profit, back to Realpolitik and the Tampa Strait of Hormuz, that piece of the profit is not anywhere in their current pro forma in relation to what they owe their investors and even repaying the bank. That's how much they've been allowed to borrow. Therefore, anyone who is pledging whatever share of that 1.7 billion and their banks and their equity contributors are now going to be diluted, and they're going to have the effect of whatever that percentage is with respect to that share of the profits. And you're right, it falls into 3 different silos by all means. You're absolutely right. You might be able to fix one of those 3 silos, yes, and not because of the Realpolitik that I'm discussing, 2 of the other 3 in your correct assessment of the 3 silos. Even in the one most vulnerable of the 3 silos, I would imagine that what you'd be doing is more like the morning paper had 2 different letters to the editor saying, why not 10% to the public for free? Why not 10% to the public for free? Which was fishing around the edges of realpolitik for the flex, the budge, the gravy, the extra, the loose, the maneuverable, the, the exploitable, the extortable. It's the maneuverable, extortable of the deal. Is there a 10% loose cushion in there, which 10% could be owned by the public, for which the public does not have to pay, as engaging in kind of transactional politics like you're the White House or something? And the transactional politics would be 10% to the public for free. If you were to take both letters to the editor this morning, reread them, and you would add tomorrow's paper or the day after, whenever you can get in there, a letter that says interesting 10% to the public free to make the deal work. What if we had a second layer of 20% on 1 or 2 or 3 of the silos involved, because you described all 3 silos, and that 20% could be bought in at a formula that would be, and now we're back to 8th grade math, the formula would be the following dollars of the total equity and the following preferential treatment of those folks who would in effect accumulate 20% of the deal in an IPO. And the IPO in effect would mean we add to what they call their income in their financing stack. Because in their financing stack are like 12 or 13 different ingredients. And you interject yourself into 1 or 2 of the 12 financing stacks with that tender, and that's what it is. It's a tender of an IPO of 20% of the total, which will benefit the following class of folks who will go to the market and will get those dollars in return for that part of the story as a way of evidencing the nature of the community participation. You might, for all I know, have somebody send back a note saying that's more viable than the 10% for free, because the 20% for discount, I'm going to call it, the 20% for discount would mean you'd have to pay the following formula. It'd be a counter formula to the one you proposed, and it would only work in silo number 3, not in silos 1 and 2, which A is spoken for, and B, the math doesn't work. The math could be made to work in silo number 3 of the 3, if indeed you go to the market to the IPO. I know that about 6 years ago, in their desperation amongst these failures, which I'm not going to get to, but as far as some of our failures, I loved it when the county administrator was backed against the wall, and I won't say his or her name, but all I know is that he or she backed into the corner, said, why don't we go to the market and get people to buy into this public undertaking, like stock in our public undertaking. It's a unique form of investment in what it is we're going to accumulate together publicly and privately, like a public-private partnership. And I remember it distinctly because he had talked to some folks on Wall Street about it, and they had said Hillsborough County is sexy enough that you might be able to pull that off, but only if you had the right 2 or 3 lures, gems that were waiting like yours at the stadium. It'd be the excess of the stadium over a certain base amount. When you get to the bottom line on Joe's question, and you get to a point where, let's say there's a capital stack of, hypothetically, in your example of 2 billion, let's say the hypothetical stack is $500 million. $500 million of that $3 billion value could be monetized, could be taken to Wall Street, and Wall Street would indeed buy pieces of that, because in 25 years, that piece of property, where it's located, could easily be as valuable as Water Street is now, for one example. As far as the nature of mixed use in all of Tampa Bay, it'd be just as valuable as Water Street. And the last piece of Water Street sold for like $15 million an acre. The last piece of Water Street sold for $15 million an acre. So gotta have piece, and it's on the books. Just look up, and it's basically it was $15 million an acre for that last missing piece in the middle of Water Street 1 and Water Street 2. And that's the nature of those last 5 or 10 pieces. The same would be true of Joe's question and Taryn's question with respect to finding that right 20% capital stack in order to get the right IPO into the solution of this problem. Next question. We have 5 minutes left? Barely. Then here are the 3 failures, and I'll quit. The 3 failures were in 2010. I think I told you why. Let me tell you about the stadium success. The community investment tax, 11%, that paid for the stadium was $168 million for the Raymond James Stadium. The $139 million for the now benchmark was St. Pete Times, was Ice Palace, whatever you call the Ice Palace where the Lightning play, that was $139 million. $83 million from the city and the county, and $53 million from the team. And the original story of the $139 million, that was the benchmark, formerly known as Ice Palace St. Pete Times Stadium. Steinbrenner Field has always been a $30 million proposition and mainly has come from the CIT. Occasionally we use bed tax, and I am going to close with a fascinating $547 million number. Why do I close with the $547 million number? Because last week at the workshop, when the legal opinion was ruled that it's okay to use the CIT for a baseball facility, even though there were strong indications from some of the commissioners that it not be so. But the actual language includes public facilities. And with public facilities, a $547 million authorized use of the $547 million for public facilities, end quote, and then it uses illustrators instead of guaranteed destinations like Steinbrenner, Yankees training. The Buccaneers are still in the middle of cutting a deal, but they're 5 years late telling us how much, and maybe they're late and may not get as much as they'd hoped from loose sources, because sources are getting a lot less loose as baseball makes its play. And 2 or 3 other facilities, including the Lightning. I think the Lightning just took a $250 million deal to market without having to tap into much of the $547 million, which means that, according to the legal opinion, the $547 million that we're going to spend, those 3 or 4 usual suspects in the sports, could have a 5th sister come in and Me Too for 30 or 40, maybe even 35 years instead of only 30, in order for her to get her share. And as she gets her share, she would not violate the $547 million allowed for our sports facilities. And I think they may have added the zoo since, which means it's already precedented that if you could add the zoo, you could add baseball. Therefore, the legal opinion would let them spend some of the $547 million for our sports facilities. And therefore, this morning's paper, Hagan said it's not adding tax dollars, it's not costing the taxpayer a dime. Wastel disputed it, but what Hagan is saying is here are the 3 sources. The bottom line on the 3 sources. Number 1, the bed taxes. Wastel wants it to be all bed tax, 6 cents. You can only get a 6 cent if you have $600 million worth of annual sales of rooms. And therefore, we just qualified. We didn't have that much 3 years ago. We didn't have that much when we were fighting in Ybor to see if Ybor could get baseball. We didn't have the last time we fought any of our fights. But 8 other counties have reached that point, like Miami and Broward, et cetera, Orlando, Osceola, et cetera. Those guys reached that level of allowed a 6 cent, and Wastel wants to use all of it. All of the 6 cent for baseball. But instead, what's probably going to happen is we're going to use 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. We're going to use 1/3 CIT, because you remember the $547 million problem, and the other competing facilities are going to come in and want their share during the term of that money. Number 2, there's extra money in the fund because we're growing a little faster than we thought we would. Now, the storms and this war have slowed it down, but technically for the last 4 or 5 years, we're exceeding the projections of what we expected from the CIT, meaning that the CIT has somewhere between 0.75% and 1% more in it than it was expected to have at this point. Therefore, we're not asking you to increase the CIT amount. It stays right where it was. It's extended for 15 years. It's raising more than we thought, and we'll use the more than we thought that it's raising for baseball, along with the 2 other sisters, and then I'll close. And the last 2 sisters are some tourist development tax, not all of the 6 cent, which Wastel wants, but some of the other 5 cents of the bed tax as they become available from other places. We've used them on Steinbrenner, used them on the Lightning facility, now known as Benchmark, et cetera, of Lowry Park Zoo, et cetera, et cetera. And the third ingredient is tax increment financing. Tax increment financing is working like a charm in Channelside. The financial people that are selling this deal, and this will be my last point, Rick, and I'll sit down. My last point will be this. The last third, the last sister in this whole baseball raised facility is tax increment financing, which is now paying, I think, something like $27 million a year in Water Street. You been to Water Street lately? Tried to pay the bill at Boulon? You see where the $27 million came from? Tried to buy a room for $900 at the Addition, you know. So suddenly we've got $27 million a year in taxes from Channelside. So what we did about 10 years ago is we bonded it. We bonded every dollar over its low tax base, which was $1 million or $2 million in those warehouse districts and those abandoned buildings that were flooding. And now we have 16 times that, and the 16 times that has been bonded, and that bonding is what created that first $6 million facility, $30 million worth of improvements to Cumberland, and 6 other roads and road closings and road openings and road connectors in Water Street, 30-some million bucks just in the first couple of years of the Community Redevelopment Agency tax increment financing of future to come property taxes. And guess what the bond issue has? If it's a 20-year bond, there's like 15 years left on the bond, and every year it's going to pay $27 million in taxes back to the bondholder, and that's the nature of tax increment financing. What if you did the same thing for $2.3 billion? And I admit only half of it's taxable, but half of it is taxable because it's going to be the mixed use, everyday store, everyday office. Those guys pay normal taxes. And therefore, and I think that was the last question I didn't get to, which was the amount of taxable. Somewhere around half of this stuff is traditional office, traditional retail, traditionally pay the taxes, and they pay taxes in the new baseball area, just like Channelside. I'm done.
All right. Well, that's Professor Weaver's class. Thank you very much for the seminar. Wow, a lot of energy. And that's all been recorded. I think that might be worth a replay at some point and take some notes on it. Thank you very much for that. We don't have a lot of time. We're over at this point. Let's not forget, we have AC here. The Tampa Downtown Partnership placards are up there. Please take a few minutes to go over there and interact with her and the placards and put some thoughts up there for her. Are there any thoughts for the good of the order? Lena?
Would be available to do anything electronically.
AC, I don't know of any electronic version of this. Okay, so the question was whether or not the Downtown Partnership's presentation would be available online for online input, and the answer to that question is no. Brian Seal? Real quick, come on up.
I won't steal too much of your time. For those of you that are on the board, you're a little familiar with this. If you have not been, this has been happening behind the scenes. Tampa Treasure Hunt. It's a new community project. We've partnered with the Tampa Downtown Partnership on it. They provided some funding for this. It's a pirate-themed scavenger hunt that's being installed in the southern part of Tampa Heights and into downtown. Project of this Civic Association, also being used as a fundraiser for it. We're installing a dozen of these small treasure chests at major culture institutions and businesses throughout that area. TampaTreasureHunt.com. We are launching on Saturday, May 2nd. That's 2 Saturdays from now at Riverfest in Waterworks Park. We're going to be announcing it, participating with the kids' crafts. It's a permanent installation. It's going to be permanent so long as the participating organizations want to host it. These are going to be filled with different prizes, beads, fun things for kids to find. It's a self-directed scavenger hunt that's available at all times to locals and visitors alike. So we're excited to get that off the ground, and hope to see you on the 2nd. And if not after the 2nd, you can go and take your family and kids and friends and participate in this anytime. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. Before we close and before I turn it back over to the partnership, let me also say, if you want to catch another one of Ron Weaver's lectures at Cafe Con Tampa, if I'm not mistaken, Friday, you're going to be presenting over at the Portico at 8 a.m. and it's on scandals.
The Tampa scandals.
Okay, and we've had.
But the consequence, like good government, the rest, leading up and down, the consequences of Tampa scandals.
And you only have an hour to cover that, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's it. We'll gavel out, knowing we've got this perimeter over here to take care of. If you would, please take 5 minutes.